Hilchish Elu Pikodin Perik Shmini. Now the din is that when a mafkid deposits something by a nifkad, so the item obviously belongs to the mafkid. So if the Gana, for example, steals something from the Beis HaShemer, so it's really considered like he stole it from the mafkid, because it's his item, and the Shemer was only holding it for the mafkid. Therefore, if there's chiyuv kefil or there's chiyuv dalad v'hei, so the pashtus is that the Ganav owes the kefil and the dalad v'hei to the mafkid. But now there's a special din that if the nifkat said that he's going to pay for the item, whereas either he had the right to taina it was nigna v'nevda, and to swear there was nigna v'nevda, and lepel he chose to pay instead of swearing nigna v'nevda, or he was moida that there was a pshia, so maybe he could have really taina that it was nigna v'nevda and then sworn, and rather he was moida that there was a pshia. Mamela comes out that he has a chiyuv tashlumin. So even though he didn't actually pay yet, but nevertheless we assume, we naman, that the mafkid was makna to the nifkad the rights to the kefil. Now how exactly that kinyan work, the Gemara discusses how does the kinyan work, because l'chorei know the makna davish leiboleilam, but I'll call upon him, the shemer was koina the rights to the kefil. And as we say, shvach haba mi'elav, not only to the kefil, but also if it went up in value, as we'll see behemshech. Masha'enkin, the goof of the behemoth still belongs to the mafkid. So therefore, if there was a shvach that came from the goof of behemoth, that doesn't go to the nifkad, even though the nifkad said he's going to pay for it, and even if the nifkad actually paid for it, even though he actually paid for it. But the item didn't become his. This we'll learn inside. Perik Shmini. Hamafkid etzel chaveri behema yikelim. He deposited a behema yikelim by someone, and lepel v'nignevo yavdu, and it was stolen, it was lost. And v'amar, and the nifkat said, the shemer said, Hareini Mishalom, I'm going to pay for it, even though I'm a shemer chinam, and I could really tain a nignavei nevda and swear and be potter, but nevertheless, Hareini Mishalom, v'lei ratzol yishava. And lepel v'nimtza haganav, later on they found the ganav, and the ganav is the Mishalom tashlumi kefil, the ganav has to pay tashlumi kefil, and if tavechumacher, if the ganav was if it was a behema, was a sheri seh, so his tavechumacher is Mishalom tashlumi above v'chamisha. So lemi mishalem, who does the ganav pay the kefil of the dalad v'hei? Lemi shahoya pikod netzli, to the shemer. Why? Shari omer hashalem, because since he said hashalem, so the din is that he is koina the rights to the kefil, even though he didn't pay it. The fact that he said hashalem gives him the rights to the kefil or to the dalad v'hei. Now that's we're talking about the kefil or the dalad v'hei. Masha'enkin chozra behema atzma, if the behema itself came back. Now the question is, who's going to get the gufa behema? Is chizeres lebaleh, so the gufa behema goes back to the original bailam. He v'gizisel v'ladisel. If that behema had gizis uvladis, so that's a shvach that comes from the gufa behema. So even though the shemer has a right to the kefil or to the dalud v'hei, but he doesn't have a right to the gufa behema, nor does he have a right to the gizis uvladis. She'en zeh shemer kein shvach haba migufa. The shemer is not being koina the gufa behemo or the shvach haba migufa. El shvach haba mi'elef. He's only being koina the shvach haba mi'elef, like the kefil or the dalad v'hei. Now we're saying that the gizes of lodas go back to the original bailam. Someone stole it, and now we're getting the behema back, and the gizes of lodas are also going back to the original bailam. So here the Rambam says, "Ukvar biyarnu she'ein agan of machzor gizes of lodas el lifnei yush." Because if the gizes of lodas happened before yush, because the bailam weren't miyayish, so then the gizes of lodas taka belong to the bailam. And even though the shemer paid for it, the shemer doesn't have a right to the gizes of lodas. The gizes of lodas go back to the original bailam. Masha'en came if lepel that he was miyayish already from it, so it doesn't go back to the original bailam. Then it belongs to the ganav. That was a takana that the gizes of lodas, that takana sashav, they made that the gizes of lodas la'achar yush should belong to the ganav. That's the din. So Nacham also, if you put up your mafkid, if there's a shemer, and Lepeli said Hareini Mishalem, he wasn't nishba, so he has a right to the tashlumi kefil and tashlumi arba v'chamisha, but he doesn't have a right to the gufa behema nor to the gizes of lodas. Now nishba hashemer v'lei ratzol l'shalom, the shemer did swear and v'lei ratzol l'shalom, and v'achar kach nimtza ganav, and Lepel the ganav was found. So then the pashtus is mishalom tashlumi kefil, tavachim machir mishalom tashlumi arba v'chamisha, l'mi mishalom l'bala bikoden, because Lepel the bala bikoden owned the animal, and Lepel while it was in the Beis HaShemer it was Ke'ilu like it was in the Beis HaBala Pikodin, because the Shemer was holding it for the Pikodin. It wasn't considered like it was in the Bala Pikodin. And since Lepel, there was no reason for the Bala Pikodin to be Makna, this Kefil to the Shemer, because the Shemer didn't do anything special. He was Nishba V'lei Ratzah L'Shalom. So therefore, the Kefil, the Daled Dehei, belongs to the original owner. V'chein, this din is not, this was talking about Benegeya, a Shemer Chinam, that it was, he could have said Gneva V'Aveda, and Lepel, he could have tied Gneva V'Aveda, and Lepel, he was Shilim V'lei Ratzah L'Shalom. V'chein, HaSeicher Parim Mechaverin, Lepel, he was Seicher Parim Mechaverin V'Nigneva, and it was Nigneva, V'Amar Hareini Mishalem V'Ein Nishba. And over here, Lechuri is Mechuyev to pay. Notice he's being made that it was Nigneva, and it's Hareini Mishalem V'Ein Nishba. And V'Acharka Chukar Aganav is also Mishalem Tashlumi Kefil, V'Tashlumi Arbar V'Chamisha L'Seicher. Why? Because She'ilu Ratzah HaSeicher HaYinishba Shem Nigneva B'Einas V'Niftar. The Seicher could have always tied it that it was Nigna B'Einas V'Niftar, so even though Aliba de Emes, it wasn't Nigna B'Einas. So the Taina, if he would have been Taina Nigna V'B'Einas, would have been a lie. But he was being made that it was Nigna not B'Einas. But nevertheless, since Lepel, he was able to Taina Nigna V'B'Einas, so Kilo, he was doing something, he was being honest about things, and he was also paying. He was paying for it. He could have gotten himself out of paying for it. So we say that the Bailam were maknet him this rights to the kefil. Now Shemer Chinam Sha'amar Pashaiti is also Zacha B'Kefil. So the first case we were talking about a Shemer Chinam that was Tainig Nignevei Nevda, but he's Shilim V'Liratzah L'Shava. And over here he's being Maida. Sha'amar Pashaiti is also Zacha B'Kefil. Sharei Chiyav Atzma L'Shalim. By saying Pashaiti, he was being Mechayiv himself L'Shalim. Ve'ilu Ratzah Amar Nignevei Yavda V'Haya Niftar. So Memela, he is Chayav. V'chein Nesis Zacha V'Asecher Sha'amar Nigneva, he admits Nigneva, is Kana HaKefil. Why? Shari Chiyav Atzma L'Shalim. Ve'ilu Ratzah Amar Mesa V'Haya Niftar. So again, all these Shemrim, so they're even either of their tining that what happened was something really that they should be potter, and really they have a right to swear that they're potter, but they don't want to swear and they want to pay, or they're being admitting that what happened was something which they're really mechuyev to, but on the other end they could have tined something which would have potted them. So in all these cases, when they admit that they're chayev, lepel the nekud is that they're admitting they're chayev and they could have gotten out of it. So the din is that they're entitled to the kefil and to the daled vehei. That's talking about a shemer chinam or a nesis socher or shemer socher or a seicher. Aval hashoyel, but someone that's a shoyel is eine koina hakefil at sheishal me'atzmi. The fact that he says he's gonna pay, and the fact that he's admitting that an oinus occurred and therefore he has to pay, because he could have tained mesa machmas malacha or b'shas malacha. But lepil, that's not considered such a regular thing, and it would be something which may be uncomfortable for him to taina. So the fact that he didn't taina that's not entitling him to the kefil. When is a shoyel entitled to the kefil? A shoyel is only entitled to the kefil if he actually paid. Aval hashoyel, but a shoyel, aval hashoyel, ein keina kefil achi yishal miatzmei until he actually pays meyatzmei. He says, "I'll pay." Kodam v'shila miatzmei. So then is b'shalom kefil v'tashlumi arba v'chamisha l'sheil. In other words, if they forced him to pay, so that's not considered he's mechuyev to pay. In other words, he was mishalom yatzmi. He admitted that he owes the money and he paid. Not only he admitted that he owes the money, but he actually paid. So that's when the shoyel is koina the kefil. So nachamot. So the nekudas hadin is that all the shemrim, in other words, a shemer chinam or a shemer socher or a seicher, the fact that they're saying that they're mechuyev to pay, or they're saying they're gonna pay, even if they didn't say they're mechuyev to pay, they said they're gonna pay. So memela, that entitles them to the kefil, to kefil and daled vehei, to eshvach haba me'elav, not to the gizes of lotus, not to the guf habeima, but to the shvach haba me'elav. Masha'ekin a shoyel, in order for him to be entitled to the kefil or to the daled vehei, is not through saying that he's gonna pay or saying that he owes to pay, but rather by actually paying, by paying miatzmei, that entitles him to get the kefil. Halacha gimel. Kol ha-koina ha-kefil, a person that's koina the kefil, is also koina ha-shvach haba mi'elav. Any other shvach, which is ba mi'elav, is also his. What's pshat shvach haba mi'elav? Ketzad. Hivkid arba soin etzel chaveri. He gave him 4 soft tvua. V'arein shavn sela. B'shas apikot, they were worth the seller. and lepel v'nignu v'yavdu, and also at that point in time they were worth a seller. And v'omar, and then he says, Hareini mishalim seller, I'm going to pay you a seller. And v'eini nishba, I don't want to pay, I don't want to swear. So he committed himself to pay a seller. So, and now, v'achar kach nimtzu, so if they would find the ganav, l'mashal, so he would be entitled to the kefil, he would be entitled to the shvach habom yelev, which is kefil. Now, v'achar kach nimtzu, they actually found the original arbos soim, v'arein shovin arbos loim, and now the arbos soim, which were originally worth a saw, is now worth 4 sloim. The original 4 saw, which are originally worth a selah, is now worth 4 sloim, so they went up in value, and that's called a shvach habom mi'elav, not a shvach habom migufei. The price went up, so that enhancement of the price is harei hein shel shemer. That belongs to the shemer, and ve'ina mishalim el seller. So the shemer only owes the original owner is a seller, because he said hareini mishalim. How much does he have to pay? He has to pay a seller, and he could keep the item. Either he could keep the item itself, which is worth 4 seller, or if the original owner insists, he could give him back that item, the original item itself, and then reimburse him with the 4 sloim or the 3 sloim, which he owes him because lepel, he's entitled to a seller, and lepel, and went up in 4 sloim, so Mimela, he'll give him back 3 sloim. Now, b'medvar mamurim, that he's entitled to get the kefil of the shvach habom yelov, shlehitrichon lebailim lebedin. The bailim didn't have to take this person ledin. He didn't have to take the shemer ledin. So he said he's going to pay. So even though lepel he didn't pay, so that but lepel at this point in time the pashtus he's going to pay. And al derez if he actually paid, so the chabad if he went ahead and paid, so for sure he was lehitrichon lebailim bedin. He went ahead and paid. So Mele he's entitled to the kefil or to the dalit vehei or to the shvach habam yelov. Avalim heidish pasha. A person a shemer was heidish pasha. And lepel the chivu bezin litin, and lepel v'lei nosen bertzeni. Lepel he didn't give. Acha kafu bezin al karche v'notl mimanu. Bezin had to go and force and get the money from him. He was meida. So if it wouldn't have come to that point in time, and the ganef would have been found before bezin was kaifa, before they came to the point where he's not paying, so he would have been entitled to the kefil. But since lepel it came to a point in time, he said that he owes the money. And Lepel Bezin says, so he said he was Pasha, and Bezin said, you chayiv the money. The Lepel he didn't pay, so Bezin had to go ahead and kafu Bezin al korche, and v'notlu mimenu, and then v'achar kachukar aganef, oy nimtza pikodin, so then is Yazer lebailim k'mei shehin. So then it goes back to the bailim, umachzinu l'shemer hadom shalokhem mimenu, because then he's not entitled to that shvach habam yelov. He's only entitled to the shvach habam yelov if they didn't force him to have to give back the item. Masha'inkin to pay for the item, but Masha'inkin if he was forced to pay for the item, so therefore he's not entitled to this shvach habam yelov. That's this din. So the mele again, if he paid for the item on his own, and then they found the item, and the item is worth more, so then he gets the shvach habam yelov, which means the fact that it went up in price. Masha'inkin if he didn't pay on his own, he went ahead and he was forced to pay. In other words, if he was never paid b'chlal, if he never paid b'chlal, so lepel. He said he's going to pay, so just like he's entitled to the kefil and dalit vei, he's entitled to the shvach habam yelov. Masha'inkin, if he said he's going to pay, and lepel, he said it was pasha, and Bezin told him he has to pay, and lepel he didn't pay until they forced him to pay. So b'chiyai gavin, he's not entitled to this shvach habam yelov, and therefore the item goes back to the original bailam. Now v'im kelim and lepel he did pay, so memela he has to obviously get back the money that he paid. The imkela mikarka gavu bezin mimenu. If lepel they took from him kela mikarka b'shuma, so then his magzul l'shemer kela v'yisideu. Then he has to give back his kelim or soda. In other words, what he paid for it, but he didn't pay for it on his own will. Lepel now the original item was found, so that original item goes to the original balabas, to the mafkid, and he gets back whatever they took for him to pay for the item. Now, there's a chiddush over here, because normally when you're goivers from someone metaltalin, so that metaltalin doesn't go back to the person you were goiver. But over here, it's kila like you were goiver betoy. So in other words, since over here the item was around, just we didn't know where the item was. So lepel, he paid for the item because the item was lost. Now, we got the item was brought back to the original owner, so it's keilu what was taken from the shemer was betois. And since it was taken, it wasn't really betois because lepel at that point in time he didn't have the item. But lepel, since it was taken, was Lepel, we got back the original item. So once you get back the original item, so whatever you took, that's the din over this. It says in Rambam. The Achrayim talk about this, but Lepel, since Lepel, you got back the original item. The mafkid got back his original item. So whatever they took from the shemer to give to the mafkid for the loss goes back to the shemer. That's this din. So nachamo. So normally when a shemer commits himself to pay, so that entitles him to the kefil, to the daled vehei, and al derech zeh to the shvach haba mi'elov, to the shvach haba mi'elov. And he says hareini mishalim, even though he said hareini mishalim, and he lepel, that entitles him to the shvach haba mi'elov. Masha'enkin, if Umoshel he said if he said posha, and lepel he didn't end up paying, and he was forced to pay, so then he loses, like he so to speak loses that shvach haba mi'elov which he would have gotten. By the fact that he said Pashaiti, so that entitled him to the Shvach Haba Me'elav, even though he didn't pay. But Lepel, by the fact that he didn't pay what he was supposed to pay, and they had to force him to pay, so that makes him lose the Shvach Haba Me'elav. And therefore, as a result of that, if Lepel, they find the item, if the item is found, so then the item goes back to the original owner, and whatever money he was taken from him is reimbursed to him. The Pastus L'churi, he also is not entitled to the Daled Vei or to the Kefil. I mean, the Rambam doesn't tie Cheruis, but L'churi is not entitled to anything that's Shvach Haba Mi'elov. Halacha Dalet. Tavu Bailam L'Shemer and V'nishba that he's potter, and V'achar Kach Shilim, he decided he's going to pay anyways. Because he already potted himself, but he says, now, after he potted himself, he decided to pay. And Lepel B'hukar Aganev, Aberheil V'shilim B'Seini, even though he was Mishalim after he originally was Nishba that he's potter, is Zocher B'Kefil, Aval Pi She'trichon B'Tchila L'Din Ad She'Nishba. Originally he was really Matrichon B'Din, and mainly he had to go down to Shvu, and he was Nishba that he's potter. And then later on he paid, but since later on he paid, so that entitles him to the Kefil. Amar HaShemer B'Tchila Eini Mishalim. Originally he says, I don't want to pay. And v'chazer v'omar hareini mishalim, and he said hareini mishalim, even though he didn't pay b'peil. He only said hareini mishalim. So here is zacha b'kefil. Here is zacha b'kefil. So in the case of before when tavu bailim and he was nishba, and so then only achar kach shilim, so we say he's entitled to the kefil. But if the fact that he says achar kach omar hareini mishalim, that's not enough. Mashenk in the case where omar eini mishalim, and then he said of hareini mishalim, he just said eini mishalim. And then he said Hareini Mishalim, he wasn't a Nishba, so B'chiyah Gavna, even the fact that he just Omar Hareini Mishalim, that's enough to entitle him to the kefil. Now Omar Hareini Mishalim, he said Hareini Mishalim, which me'emes, once he says Hareini Mishalim, he's mechuyev to be Mishalim, because he said, I'm accepting myself the chiyuve of the shemer. And v'chazar v'Omar Eini Mishalim, so the question is that do we taking the Chazar v'Omar Eini Mishalim, because since he said Hareini Mishalim, he's obligated to be Mishalim. So it could be the fact that he's saying Eini Mishalim, he's just postponing the chiyuv tashlum, the tashlum, but Lepel is still intending on paying. Oy she'amar hareini Mishalim umes, and v'amru habonim einon Mishalim. The bonim said einon Mishalim. Again, the question is whether or not we take the bonim's einon Mishalim seriously, or we say no, they're really the father said hareini Mishalim. He was mechayiv himself to Mishalim. The pashas, the bonim will also be Mishalim. They're just saying einon Mishalim, and they're postponing the tashlum. Oy shali hispik l'tveis hashemer at shemes. The shemer never really got involved. He died before there was a chance to be teveim. V'tavus habonim v'shilmu b'nei hashemer. The b'nei hashemer actually paid. So what's the suffix over here? The suffix is that maybe the original shemer, which really was a shemer for you. So over there, when he says hareini mishalim or he's mishalim, so then you want to feel you feel a certain sense of gratitude towards him. So mainly you're makna the kefil. But the b'nei hashemer could be b'nei hashemer even if they pay b'peil, you're not makna the kefil. That's the suffix in the Gemara. Oy sheshilmu habonim lebonim, or the questions of the bonim paid bonim. Whereas the question is the original mafkid. He's the one that wants to be makna the kefil, but could be the bonim aren't so interested in being makna the kefil, because again they don't feel that sense of gratitude. So over here we're talking about bonim libonim. So that's like two svaras that there shouldn't be an inyan of aknos kefil. Eisha shil mashemer mechza. The shemer said I'll pay half of it. So the question is, and now you found the ganaf. So the question is it considered kilu like he entitled to half of the kefil? is there such a musik of half of the kefil? Or shol shtei paras, the shilam achas mem. So over here, let's say if the tzad is that there's no tzad of half of it, if let's say we say there's no musik of half of the kefil, but on the other hand, over here there were two paras, so maybe the two paras, since each par is separate, and he paid for one of them, so it's considered like he paid for a whole pikadon, even though it was really only one of the two paras, but each para was considered like a separate pikadon. That's that tzad. Or shol mishutfin and v'shilum le'echad mem, so he paid completely to one of the shutfim. Or shutfim sheshalu v'shilum echad mem. So again, this shutf is only one shutf, but lepel he paid all of his chiyuvim v'shilum echad mem. Or shal meno isha v'shilum lebaila. He didn't actually pay to the mafkid itself. He paid to the baila. Or isha sheshala, the isha was shala v'shilum baila. Is called elu safik. All these safik. You know, this whole din, that Chazal told us that lepel, if the shemer paid, so then we say that the mafkid was mafkid to him, the kefil. So all these tziyurim, the shailas b'chiyah gavna, they were also mafkid. In other words, if there's a regular shemer and a regular mafkid, so we assume the mafkid is grateful to the shemer, and the shemer, so the shemer, by the shemer saying areinu mishalim, so the mafkid is maknit him. Masha'inkin, when we're dealing with the fact that the shemer, either the shemer said first areinu mishalim, then he said areinu mishalim, or first he said areinu mishalim, and then the bonim said areinu mishalim, or the bonim were mishalim, or shil bonim lebonim. All these cases, the question is, it's not the regular case where there's the mafkid to the nifkat. So the question is, if this din that the mafkid is makna, the kefil also applies. So memela, since it's a suffix, v'reya kefil mutal b'suffix, ve'ina tachas yad achad mem. In other words, the ganav is definitely mechuyev kefil. The question is to who is mechuyev kefil? Is he mechuyev kefil to the shemer, or is he mechuyev kefil to the original owner, or to the children of the original owner? Is leficha chelken kefil a shvach, the shvach that's bam yelav, bein balakod no bein hashemer. So it has to be divided because it's a suffix who it belongs to. Ve'im kodem echad mem v'tafas hakel. If lepel one of them went and it was tefas all of the kefil or all of the shvach bam yelav, is ein mitziin niyadi ba'afilu b'chutzlars. Even though in chutzlars normally you're not gave a knas, but lepel tfisa helps even in knas. Tfisa helps even in knas. So mele could help tfisa even in the kefil. Halacha vav. Nignav hapikoden ba'inus. The pikoden was nignav ba'inus, and v'achar kach hukar aganav. And lepel afterwards, after the pikoden was nignav ba'inus hukar aganav. So the question is the shemer mechuyev to deal with the ganav? In other words, l'chura, if it wasn't found the ganav, so the shemer is potter because it was nignav hapikoden ba'inus. Lepel, now they found the ganav. So the din is mitzat chiyuv shmira. The shemer, even a shemer chinam, has to go and mon from the ganav. That's his din. Niknav hapikoden ba'inus v'achar kach hukav aganav. Then we found who the ganav was. Is echad shemer v'echad shemer socher oised din aganav. He has to go ahead and be oised din and aganav. Einanish, but he can't taina that it was nignav ba'inus on potter. Memela, I have nothing to do with it. Because lepel, since at this point in time it was hukar aganav, so memela he still has mitzad his chiyuv shmira. He has to mon the ganav toward the. That's talking about if he didn't yet pay, he didn't yet swear. Now, kodam v'nishba v'acharka chukra ganav. In other words, there was a shemer chinam or a shemer sacher which swore that they weren't pesheya or that it happened ba'inus, and then lepel is hukra ganav. Is im shemer chinam, if he was only a shemer chinam, is ratza emed b'shvuase. If he wants, he could say, listen, I already swore that it was ba'inus and I'm potter, and memela I have no chiyuv to deal with the ganav. And Ratza oised din maganav. But if he wants, he could go ahead and do a din maganav. He could go and mon the ganav to a din teira, and the ganav can't say labal dvarim dediyat, because lepel, since he was the shemer, so in Mele he could go ahead and do a din with the ganav. That's talking about if he's a shemer chinam, so he has a right to say that since I swore already, I'm potter. However, if shemer sacharu, if he's a shemer sacher, eise imidin, he has to do a din. No, as part of his chiyuv shmira is that if lepel later on it was hukar aganav, even though he already was nishba and lechuri was potter, but al shemer sacher he's mechuyev to make a din and aganav. Nignav hapikoden be'inus. The pikoden was stolen from the Beis HaShemer, it was an oinus, and the hechzire haganav al Beis HaShemer, lepel the ganav returned this item that he stole to the Beis HaShemer, v'hareo behema, the item was a behema, u'meisa sham b'pshia. And now the shemer was negligent, and as a result of that it died. So obviously, if he would have been negligent before the ganav stole it, So he would have been chayiv because he's a shemer and he's chayiv b'pshia. Over here, the Ganav stole it, and then he returned it, and then the shemer was p'sheya. So the shaila is the shemer still a din shemer? That's the shaila. The shaila is once the Ganav stole it, so l'chura the shemer loses his chiyuv shmira. And even though the Ganav returned it l'beis ha-shemer, but the shemer doesn't reassume the din of a shemer, and memela, if he's a shemer, he's chayiv b'pshia. If he's not a shemer, he's not chayiv b'pshia. That's his din. Nochamo. Nignav ha-pikodin be'enis, the pikodin was stolen be'enis, v'ychzire ha-Ganav l'beis ha-shemer, v'areu behema u'meisa sham b'pshia. So the din is yesh b'davar safik im kol shmirasei. If we say his shmira was finished and therefore v'nifter he's already potter, even though he was a b'sheya, but he no longer has the din of a shemer. Yadayin lekol shmirasei because lepel he was a shemer, and the item was returned to him by the Ganav. So mele he resumes his din shmira. Lefichach hashemer potter milshalom because there's a suffix whether he's a din shemer and he's chayiv on the pshia. And tafsu abaylim, but if the baylim will tefes, they mitzvah miyada because there's a suffix, a fake the dinner, whether he's really chayiv, whether he's chayiv for the pshia, because whether or not he has a din shemer. So therefore, the Rambam generally paskins that if there's a suffix and there was tfisa, even lachar shnei la suffix is ein mitzvah miyada. Brich rachmona desayon.